Hi, my name is David P. Shapiro. I'm the owner and managing partner of the law offices David P. Shapiro, located in San Diego, California, where my firm helps good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime. In this video, I want to talk to you about the value of the police body-worn camera. Okay, a couple of years ago, particularly in San Diego, a lot of law enforcement agencies, pretty much started by San Diego Police, picked up by the Sheriff's Department, and all the smaller subdivisions or smaller law enforcement agencies within the county, almost exclusively now mandate the use of body-worn cameras. And a body-worn camera is a camera that the officer will wear on his or her chest, and it'll capture, or at least it should, when turned on and working and used properly, and not manipulated not to be working or not to be turned on, should get a good verse of video as well as an audio of what the officer is or is not seeing and what the officer is or is not hearing during the course of their investigation, during the course of their encounter with a citizen, during the course of their encounter with the suspect, whatever the case may be. Well, why does that matter? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. One is it's a mutual accountability in the sense that, cops are going to think twice, or at least they should, before stepping out of bounds, before doing things that unfortunately far too many have done in years past. And some may be deterred to act a certain way or say a certain thing because of a body-worn camera. And the other is it's important for the citizens of the community and society as a whole, right? Because what it does is it also should eliminate many false accusations against law enforcement. Many people just piling on. I'm going to say they did something like this to me too, when there's no validity to it and there's no reason to the mud when there's complete direct contradictory proof or lack thereof of the accusation in a body-worn camera. So I think it's accountability for both law enforcement and the citizens they come in contact with. So you always have to wonder, well, what's the real motivation if someone's against a body-worn camera, if someone's trying to, limit the use of body-worn camera, limit the disclosure of a body-worn camera. Well, for us as criminal defense attorneys, what's really important and what's been really valuable is a lot of times, the he said, she said, cop says this, client says this. A lot of times that gets flushed out on a body-worn camera, meaning we'll be able to review it and say, wait, that's not really too accurate. Or actually, you know what? You're exactly right. And we have documentation or documentary evidence that this has been proven. What you said it was, not what the cop said happened or didn't happen. And it's also important, a lot of times, a lot of attorneys will, they'll be, body-worn cameras sometimes could be, they could be as quick as 30 minutes, 45 minutes. They could be 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 30 hours worth of footage, depending on the number of officers involved, depending on the seriousness of the accusations, the depth and length of the investigation. And a lot of times attorneys will look at it and say, well, I don't have the time for that, right? I don't have the time for that. Client admitted to things, this is a mitigation case. Let's just get the best deal possible. Or, my client wasn't even on the body-worn cameras. I'm not really worried about what the people said that was on there. This is a really unique issue. Body-worns I'll get to when I get to it. Quite the contrary approach here at this firm. And the reason is we've seen firsthand over and over and over again, year after year after year, the value of a body-worn camera, even in cases when you and your client know from the get-go, this is a case that's going to result in some sort of plea, right? There's value in the body-worn cameras of pretty much almost every second in the body-worn camera because we've been able to utilize our client's reaction to news, our client's behavior, and be able to use that to their advantage when it's appropriate to do so, even in negotiating a case with the district attorney, or even when before a judge at sentencing, to be able to refer to the body-worn camera and talk about, hey, you should have seen the way my client reacted when they heard this news of what had happened to the person that they were involved in the accident with. Really, really raw footage sometimes that sometimes not, but sometimes can really be used effectively. There's really bad stuff for you, client on a body-worn camera. The attorney's going to want to know about that sooner rather than later, right? To maybe not push certain buttons. It's going to get the district attorney to, God forbid, review it, right? Because we know that they, more often than not, will not review it unless the case goes to a preliminary hearing or unless the case goes to trial. They're going to take what's in the cop's report as what happened. Because they may not have the time, they may not have the patience, they may not have the real need or see the desire or the value to them of reviewing the entirety and outlining the entirety of the body-worn camera. What I can tell you is that a lot of times, even in non-issues at a hearing, I will reference the body-worn camera and some obscure portion of it just to let everyone know in that room that me or the other attorneys in my firm have reviewed it. We know what was said. We know where it was said. And, hey, we know this case better than you, right? And all else being equal, that could result in better outcomes. It certainly gives you a better chance, in your case, a better chance of success if you're litigating at a preliminary hearing, at a motion, let's say to suppress evidence or a trial. But there's also a lot of value there in a body-worn camera, even on mitigation cases, even on cases where for your client. So I hope this video has been helpful understanding the multiple values, the multiple layers of value to a body-worn camera for you as the client to speak to your attorney about that. Hey, is there any value here from a factual standpoint? Is there any value here from a mitigation standpoint? And to be extremely, extremely skeptical if your attorney or your law firm's telling you, nah, I don't need to review that. Ask them why. Ask them why. They may have a reason. They probably have a reason. The issue is it a good reason? Is it because they're lazy? Is it because they're not experienced enough to know the value in a body-worn camera? Is it because they're not skilled enough not to know how to use it effectively, no matter where your case is going to go? So if you have questions about body-worn cameras, particularly in San Diego, felony case, misdemeanor case within San Diego, feel free to give my firm a call. We're just one phone call away at 619-295-3555. Again, 619-295-3555. My name is David Shapiro. I'm a San Diego criminal lawyer. 619-295-3555.